Hey, and welcome to episode 14 of Think Like a Hacker. There is no episode 13 for reasons that I think should be obvious to absolutely everyone. Let's just say I'm a little bit superstitious. So this episode is an interview that I did with Andy Fragen, Dr. Andy Fragen at WordCamp Orange County a few weeks ago. I had a really awesome conversation with Andy. He is a trauma surgeon as well as being a plugin developer. Andy has developed a plugin called the GitHub Updater, which gives you some really cool capabilities if you want to host a plugin that you use in your WordPress site, not on WordPress.org, but you want to host it in a GitHub repository. Gives you the ability to update the plugin and so on, and Andy goes into some depth describing how that all works. Had a really great conversation with Andy. I think you're going to enjoy it very much. Here is Dr. Andy Fragen at WordCamp Orange County.
Hi, I'm Andy Fragen, and as my Twitter bio says, I'm just a geek surgeon.
So that doesn't really fully capture it though, right? I mean, you're not just a surgeon, you're a trauma surgeon?
Yes. It seemed a little bit extra superfluous to say just a geek trauma surgeon. But I came back again to doing trauma surgery. I was doing it for about 10 years, left, didn't really leave, just stopped working with the guys I was working for, and then came back because let's say, got a better deal.
Mm-hmm. For us normal people who don't work in trauma surgery, there's just this fascination around the field. I mean, it's both an incredibly complex field and I'm sure very real time. And it seems a little bit like a black box to me. So it's just really cool that we have a trauma surgeon in the WordPress community. So
it's interesting, as I've given a talk or two about kind of some of the similarities, and it's like, I get people who are asking questions about things they don't understand that are of a relatively technical nature sometimes in trying to explain them, the medicine, the critical care, what's going on. And you have to try and figure out how to explain something in someone else's language so that they can understand it, and then make a complex decision based upon that sometimes.
Where do you practice?
In Palm Springs, California.
Okay. And what days of the week? Sort of busy Friday nights kind of thing? Or?
I currently work, 8 to 10, 24-hour shifts a month.
24-hour shifts?
Yeah. Is the arrangement I've come up with.
Wow. Because
it gives me a lot more, working for a 24-hour block. Once you get used to something, that's not a big thing. I mean, our standard call day for, I've been taking general surgery call for over 20 years, and our standard general surgery call day, not the trauma, but it was 24 hours, and sometimes it was a week at a time. And sometimes it was a week at a time at more than one hospital at a time. That was kind of earlier.
So you're working for 24 hours straight. Are you sleeping during that time?
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I don't have to. The way the requirements are, I have a 15-minute response time for what's called a trauma code to the ER. We're getting in the weeds a little bit. So I live within 15 miles, 15 minutes to the hospital, so I can go back. I can go home if there's nothing happening, which, at night usually, unless there's something happening, there's nothing happening.
So I guess you've worked 24-hour shifts straight where you're working in the hospital, not sleeping, right?
Longer.
Longer? What's the longest you've done?
When I was a resident on the cardiac surgery service, there were 2 of us on the service, and my colleague went on vacation for 10 days.
Nice.
So I was technically on service for the entire 10 days straight.
Did you sleep at all?
Sure.
Just kind of catnapped here and there when you could?
They had a 6 or 8 bed cardiac ICU where I was, One of the rooms was basically storage, had a bed in it. I'd get sheets from it, I'd get clean sheets from housekeeping, throw them in the thing and tell the nurses, just come get me. Wake me up if you need something, I'm here. Go home and shower every day or so. And just keep doing it until you had a break.
Do you find it takes a toll on you?
I was younger then, it was easier. and honestly, like anything, it just depends on what you get used to. I mean, I find when people talk about coders and developers and they drink coffee, I'm like, you guys are amateurs, so as far as I'm concerned. It's like, I drink coffee all day long. I can drink coffee before I go to bed. It's a drink, it's something to do to
It's like gasoline
yourself.
for you, like a car needs gasoline, trauma surgeon needs coffee, just way of life now.
My kid was saying, I'm watching you're on your 4th cup of coffee so far this morning. It's like 8 o'clock. I'm like, no, it's only the 3rd, I think. But
what got you into WordPress?
I started with a website, creating a website, I guess, in 2001, give or take. There was a product Dave Weiner put out called Radio Userland. It was based on Manila. Dave Weiner's the guy who wrote the RSS spec. And it was based on his product called UserTalk, which was a scripting language, kind of a superset of AppleTalk, and had a built-in object-oriented database on the back end. But when you ran it, it would create static files. So I was doing that, and I was actually coding in that, because I was also coding in AppleTalk for some stuff, for scripting stuff at the time. And as that kind of evolved or devolved, I was working with another guy who was doing it, and he'd written another web, CMS based on Ruby on Rails, and I was doing some stuff with him, and then I, picked up something else, and finally wrote a script to just, WordPress seemed pretty active. This was just around the time that Movable Type had their licensing issues.
Totally.
And I saw that there was a lot of action. There was a lot of churn. There was a lot of talk about
It's about
WordPress.
2005, right?
7, I think, maybe. But
okay, yeah, around
I could
that time,
be wrong.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of energy and enthusiasm about it. I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna stop kind of working on the back end of it and just let me put together my site again and just a place to put stuff down and do that. And so I wrote an export script and or had him help me with an export script, because I don't do Ruby. And we did it, and I imported it into WordPress, and I just did that for a while, and it was fun. And I didn't really start coding in WordPress until custom post types came out.
Right about the time it started evolving into a serious CMS?
Yeah, that was either, I can't remember when that was, 2013, 2012, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, no, maybe it was earlier. I don't remember. And it was interesting, it was fun. I mean, I didn't know PHP. I've never seen PHP before WordPress. And so basically kind of taught it to myself. And I took a couple programming classes in college, and once you understand the basic constructs of conditionals and subroutines and loops and this and that, it's the rest of it's just what's the syntax.
Mm-hmm. So where on earth did you find the time to play with PHP and WordPress if you're practicing as a trauma surgeon?
Nights, weekends. I mean, it's like every once in a while you get weekends off, you get time off, you learn. We learn mostly when we have something that we need or want, or a function or a desire, or how to do something. We scratch our own itch. And at the time I was learning a lot, because I just wanted to figure, somebody I just wanted to figure out. Some of it's, I want to do this, or I want my site to look like that and change that. And there were ways, I learned early, I took that don't mess with core right? You try not to modify core functions in order to get your result. And you learn about the actions and filters and hooks and whatnot in your code and how to make it work. My confession is I still have no idea how the loop runs.
Right.
I've got a basic concept of it, but I totally do not do the front end stuff for WordPress.
But you seem to be doing okay because you have a plugin that you've released. And
I've got a lot of plugins that I've released. Some are certainly more complex than others. I actually just submitted one of the directory yesterday before I drove out that is basically a single hook call, a single action hook call.
What does it do?
It hides the Jetpack menu from non-admin users. Sorry, guys. There was already a plugin that did this, but it wasn't using the right hook, and it was having an issue, and it was having a timing issue, and it was having everybody, so the guy who wrote it didn't have it, never fixed it, never, did it. I actually reached out to the guy in Slack, and I'd already written the base of the other plugin, before then. And I said, hey, here's a solution to the problem. Are you doing anything with it? And he's like, no, do you want it? I can give it to you. I'm like, it's like, you could just give me commit access to it and I can see about it. That's how I gained the WordPress beta tester plugin. But he never did. And so I'm like, okay, it's been a couple of weeks. I'll just release this and we'll call it a day. It's one of those one and done plugins I'll probably never have to touch again, unless the hook in Jetpack changes, which it probably won't.
Mm-hmm. So you have an interesting plugin that integrates GitHub with WordPress. Can you talk about that a little bit?
It integrates GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab, and obviously the self-hosted versions of those as well. So when I was making a couple sites, and I made one for my medical staff, and I made one for my son's Boy Scout troop, and I found myself reusing a lot of the same custom plugin code. Now, they weren't very detailed, or they weren't very difficult ones, but there was some custom code that I just wanted to be able to, instead of FTPing the changes up to 3 different sites, I wanted an easier way to do that. And I came across a library that basically you had to include in your plugin that would cause it to integrate with the core update functions. And I'm like, well, what if I want to update the updater part? Then I have to go change that in every single plugin. And that's one of the reasons the GitHub Updater plugin is a plugin and not a composer library. Is because
not something that you have to integrate in your own plugin, right?
Right. I wanted to try and simplify the integration method for the Updater plugin. So at a minimum, in order to use the Updater plugin, all you need is a single header comment.
You said a single header comment. Where is that comment? Where does it appear?
A plugin or a theme has a header section. It's where it says theme name or plugin name, author. I think that those are the 2 minimum requirements for creating a plugin.
And this is in the readme.txt file.
This is the text file.
Yeah.
The plugin text file, for it to be recognized by WordPress as a plugin. And so I added another header, and added the ability to find that header and search for it, and I parse it. And so instead of having to send the updater an array of data, which a lot of updaters do, I just parse the data. I just parse the URL of the location for where the plugin is, and create the data. So if you have a plugin that you're using GitHub for version control, and you update that, and you bump the version number, when the cache runs out on the updater, and if you see it, your site will see an update to that plugin. And you'll see an update in the same manner that if it existed in the plugin directory does. You can either hit update from the plugins page or update from the core update core page, and it will update your plugin.
So this plugin is hosted at, you mentioned 3 different source repositories. It could be GitHub, and what were the other 2?
The 3 primary kind of commercial and freely available repositories that people use for for version control are GitHub, Bitbucket, and GitLab. Okay. GitHub is by GitHub. Atlassian makes Bitbucket, and GitLab is just a GitLab group. GitLab and GitHub have very similar APIs. Bitbucket's is quite different, and that causes issues every once in a while.
Okay. So I just want to kind of clarify this for our listeners and our viewers. If you have a plugin that you're hosting in GitHub, I guess the workflow would be you install that plugin on your site, you install your plugin, which is called
GitHub Updater.
GitHub Updater. So both of those exist on the site. GitHub Updater will look at your readme.txt header, will see the GitHub URL.
It looks in the header in the plugin file, not in the README file.
Okay.
I mean, it does parse the README file so that if you click on the View Details link, it will populate that just like a plugin on the .org repository.
Okay.
So it will give you all that data also.
Okay. And at that point, this your plugin is kind of maintaining the plugin that's hosted in GitHub, in the sense that when a new release comes out in GitHub, as you said, as the cache expires, after a little while it'll say, "Hey, there's a new version. Do you want to update?"
Right.
And there's a flow in the WordPress admin interface where you can just go ahead and update as if it was hosted in the repo.
It is identical to the flow that happens if a plugin updates from the repository, from the directory, and the reason is because it's easier. It's already there. I don't have to rewrite the stuff that's there. Now, I did try a long time ago when I first wrote it to try and get it into the repository, but they first said it was like phoning home, and I'm like, or installing executable code, and I'm like, well, I don't really install that. But the basics of it is they're not promoting any outside hosting repository. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. Okay. And they've subsequently rewritten the guidelines to make it more clear that you can't install code from any non-WordPress.org source.
Okay.
And that's fine.
Yeah, and I can see why they did that, because the idea is that, I guess some of the things that they face is that you get a plugin developer who writes a plugin that grabs arbitrary PHP code from that developer's server, and it's impossible for anyone to audit the security of that plugin, because you never actually get to see all of the code that it could possibly run, because it can grab anything that it wants at any time from that dev server.
I will tell you that to change some of your workflow is you only need to install the GitHub Updater plugin, because you can use that plugin to then install any other plugin from one of those other sources by just having the URL. And the benefit from doing that is, I don't know if you've ever downloaded a plugin from GitHub, but if you download it, it has the plugin slug, and then it has the branch or tag slug attached to it, and then a zip file. Well, it will change the slug. It will change the directory structure in your site to do that, and that can be somewhat problematic. Also, as far as when you update it, it may update the code and then deactivate the plugin because it's now changed. So I have code in the install portion and obviously in the updating portion to normalize that back to just to be this plugin slug.
This is really cool. We have a a workflow internally, because we have some plugins that do certain things on our own site. Our site, wordfence.com, is an e-commerce website. We take orders, we interact with customers in various ways. And the way that we've added functionality to our own site is by creating plugins and obviously having a custom theme. But those plugins, I believe the workflow right now is that they exist in a repository, and I think it's a private GitHub repo. And
Can update to private repos.
That's awesome. And what we do right now is the guys will generate a zip file from that repo. They will upload that to a staging server and do that zip upload workflow that WordPress comes built in with, and test it there, and then do the same on the live site. And so the idea that you can just grab it directly from the repo on staging, if you're happy with that, just duplicate the process on production. That's really interesting.
So yeah, you wouldn't have to do that. All you'd have to do is bump the version number in the repository, find the, so here's what I do. The Updater plugin is smart enough to figure out what branch you're on. So most of my, I don't necessarily follow a standard Git flow format, but most of my repositories start out with a develop branch and a master branch. Now, master is the same thing as whatever is tagged if I tag releases. You don't have to tag releases, but if you start tagging releases, you have to keep tagging releases. Otherwise, you'll end up in this vicious cycle, because I have made certain choices that, I've made certain choices in the plugin. So if you start tagging releases, you have to keep doing it. Because the assumption is that's how you've chosen to develop. So if you make a tag and then you make a version bump that's higher than the tag, but you didn't tag the next version, it will reload that old tag, that last highest tag. You don't have to, but it also does that only in the master branch. So I develop on my stuff on the develop branch. I will automatically send it to my test server. In this case, you could be doing it to a staging site. It will show an update there, or you can put a webhook in to automatically update it when you do any commit to it. It'll just automatically show up as updated.
Wow.
I do that because I've added that function. I use that on some of my sites for the plugin. So you can do all your stuff locally. You test it. You push the commit up to GitHub, and in that case, it would automatically push it to your staging site and load it up. What you can do then is, on the live site, just wait till you've got it on at master. Set the version on the live site as master, install, and then whenever you push the master or tag a release, the live site will see that and update it. It doesn't necessarily have to do the update automatically, though it could.
That's great. It really opens up some interesting possibilities in terms of ops workflows in the organization.
I've been working with the Modern Tribe guys, because one of the first plugins I put out was a category, the events calendar category colors plugin, to colorize the background or the sidebar of your calendar event based on the category. And I've been working with one of their guys to help make that plugin. And Scott Kingsley Clark, who now works for Modern Tribe, asked about possibly integrating the Updater plugin into their workflow for development and testing. And I'm like, tell me what you need, what you want, and let's see what we can do. And it was actually all relatively easy with a couple of hooks and things, to where internally they create different builds by quarter, and they have a different build number and name on it. And what they needed to do was hijack the download update. And so to inject their own data into it. And so he built it out, and he made this plugin for their developers and their support people, so that if someone's testing out a different version of their own internal plugins, that they can easily update it from the development version to the development version. And I thought that was just incredibly clever. And my part of making it work was basically adding a couple hooks so that he could inject his data into the right place. And thank God WordPress has that ability with actions, with filters and actions and stuff. So it made it pretty simple. But I always find it interesting to see how people are using it, because it's one of those things. I have no metrics on it. I don't have any concept of how many people use it. I don't have any idea how many installs it has or what the user. I mean, I know there's a lot of people in the Netherlands and stuff that use it, because I get a lot of questions and stuff from people there, all over the place. It's kind of interesting.
That's awesome. Andy, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, you're a computer guy, and I know what that feels like, computer guy in the family, right? Anyway, but you work in a hospital, and you're working on computers fairly frequently, I would assume, interacting with patient records and that kind of thing. We're in the cybersecurity space, and one of the things that we've seen is incidents where hospitals have actually had to turn ambulances around to go somewhere else because they've been hit by ransomware or something like that. That happened in the UK a couple of years ago. So do you have any thoughts on how up-to-date and secure hospital systems are? You're interacting with them all day long. Are they sort of out-of-date Windows, old Windows that is easily infected, or do you feel like they've done a lot to improve security and do a better job of updating things?
So I work at a hospital that is run by a very large healthcare company. They have 80-something hospitals across the country. I'm not going to name them. No, like all companies, there's a lot of it's not broken, or my perception is that it's not broken. I couldn't tell you how secure it is or not. I mean, most ransomware and most ransomware type things are someone loads something up with their computer and hits the wrong key, right? Or runs the wrong program, or visits the wrong website and gives it access to do something. So it's not about necessarily how secure their data transfer is. I mean, most hospitals transfer their data by an HL7 protocol, and they're all running on encrypted certs, so the stuff all goes back and forth in an encrypted fashion, and technically shouldn't be much different than a bank's transfers. HIPAA is the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, is the law of the land in the United States, and that has a lot to do. That there's a lot of very expensive fines for personal health information that escapes. I can just tell you how it works. I can't, how their software and the electronic health records work, and I use it, but I'm not in the systems of it, so I can't really comment on that.
Okay. I wanted to put it's called a dead cat on both of our mics because the wind's picking up, and it's going to create a little bit of wind noise, but I think it might be okay. Unfortunately, I didn't bring them with. All right.
You can tell that?
Oh, yeah. No, I've done enough shoots where the little bit of wind that we're feeling now is going to be...
Well, you're feeling it more. It's coming to my back.
Yeah, which is good because you're the main subject. So I'm counting on that. Have you noticed that there's an increase in the awareness of cybersecurity in hospitals?
I think there's an increase in awareness. From a practical standpoint, most of the people using the systems are not very computer literate. And so it's a lot of them, there's a lot of doctors who came around and are doing stuff, and now we have computer order entry, and they're required to use it. There's a lot of people that just haven't done it in a long time or haven't ever done it. And so you've got a current generation of physicians who are my age or older that didn't grow up with computers necessarily. They grew up with paper systems. And I'll tell you, even the people who are in charge of implementing the electronic health records treat it like a paper system replacement. It's almost like their methods and processes of using something are, okay, we started out here, we've admitted somebody to this area of the hospital, and when we transfer them to there, we just rip up all the stuff that we did here and we rewrite all the stuff we did for the new place. I'm like, we have persistence now. I mean, everything's in the computer. The orders are still present. They're still there. You know, if you want us to validate that they're still worthwhile when they move and transition to that next level of care, okay, no problem. But to basically discontinue everything and then try to remember to recontinue everything that you had isn't practical, isn't safe, I think. But some of the people, well, they have the ability to run the software, they don't use the software. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I found it easier kind of doing the fun computer programming stuff to come up with better workflow ways. And I try to share those where I can, but some people take it, some people don't. For a while I was the medical director for informatics at the hospital.
How was that?
It was a lot of finding issues and trying to help them fix issues, or trying to help people understand how they can get their work done in a more efficient manner. It was, they weren't interested in, oh, you should do this and it would be better. It was more, this is what we're doing and we need you to help cheerlead how we're going to implement this.
Get on board.
And get it board, absolutely.
Interesting. Andy, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you how people can find your plugin.
It's on GitHub. If you search GitHub Updater, GitHub-Updater, you'll find it. The full URL is github.com/afragen/GitHub Updater.
Dr. Andy Fragen, thank you very much for your time today. It's been wonderful chatting to you, and I think we'll probably end up using your plugin internally ourselves. It sounds like a really useful piece of kit. Thank you so much.
If you have any questions, hit me up. I'm happy to help answer them.
All right, will do. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Andy for chatting with me at WordCamp Orange County. I really enjoyed our conversation. You can find Andy on Twitter at Andy Fragen, and his last name is spelled Fragen. You can find Andy's plugin on GitHub at github.com/afragen/GitHub-Updater. And that's it for this week. We'll be back early next week with the news. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye, everyone.